Hello, friends. Sitting out here in the snow, which is my new favorite thing to do. Um, One of the outcomes of being an Irish Australian living in the Czech Republic and just enjoying the diversity of life and the many uh, beautiful expressions of nature that are possible. I feel inspired to do a series on awakening, and even though there's a plethora of people out there releasing content on awakening, um, I could contribute or I could not contribute. It's just a choice, and ultimately, I feel like it can be helpful sometimes in balancing some of the sensationalism out there, just to have a really human voice on the experience. I find that a lot of people are connecting and releasing content on awakening from this kind of a platform now, as opposed to accessing it or presenting it in more institutionalized ways. And I think there's good reason for that. I mean, one is that not a lot of folks are feeling really safe in institutional formats nowadays. And also, it's really nice just to have like someone who looks and sounds like an everyday average person talking to you about this stuff, because that can sometimes resonate or help to validate our own experiences. However, I'm not here to validate your experience necessarily, because another problem that I see with this particular format or way of expressing about awakening is that there is a lot of sensationalism. There's a lot of focus on what people might describe the signs of awakening, and they're quite different to what I perceive as the signs of awakening, and what many of my blessed teachers, who I feel very grateful for in their truth speaking, see as the signs of awakening. So there is, lists and lists. We can go through them, but you probably have a sense of it. Kundalini rising, intense energy coming up through your spine, igniting the different chakras, um, massive changes in your life, everything kind of falling apart or then realigning itself in the right way, sudden, intense ability to empathize with people, to feel their emotions, maybe even read their thoughts. I mean, it goes on and on. And certainly, I'm not denying that these can be some of the features of an awakening experience. In fact, I myself have experienced a lot of kind of otherworldly, very intense states of consciousness, which have come along with what I see as the core of awakening. And that core of awakening, in my mind, again, just being a human, sharing my own experience and speaking from my intuitive heart, not claiming any kind of expertise, uh, that core of awakening is actually an expansion of awareness. And I'd like you to look at awareness in not a idealized kind of way. When I say the expansion of awareness, I don't necessarily mean suddenly being able to know what's going on the other side of the world without logging onto the internet. Um, what I mean is that more and more in the day-to-day process of your life, you are aware of your own awareness, and that you are sitting in that as the ground of your being, and that you are able to observe, not in a disinterested or disconnected kind of way, but in actually a very intimate way, uh, to absorb, notice, feel, be in touch with the content of your experience from that location of your awareness. In my own process, I had some very profound kind of insights and intense states of consciousness where this beingness, this just like pure presence, was really the all encompassing state of my being at the time. My mind completely empty, uh, more than days at a time. Be this is where words are hard to point, right? Um, being in this kind of pure beingness. And many people refer to that as bliss. It's often, when we translate this Satchitananda, we translate it as being consciousness bliss. But there's a lot of baggage that's tied up with the word bliss in the West, and it's generally understood to be kind of like ecstatic or deeply pleasurable. But actually, the ground of being, it is blissful, but not in such a kind of over the top way. It's blissful because it's peaceful, because there's a lack of conflict with what is unfolding in experience. There's a harmonizing with the moment. And even the term harmony, it's got baggage in the English language as well. So all of this is like convoluted and difficult to unfold. But those states of consciousness, they were states, right? They were like a moment of recognition, or even several days of recognition, which faded. And then, the rest of my life, as far as I'm concerned, is a process of not trying to get back there. That's very important. Not trying to get back there, because that's just an experience. It's not the ground of my being itself. The ground of my being itself can only be accessible as I am right here and right now. And if right here and right now things are very ordinary and very banal, that doesn't mean that I can't be present to and to be operating from the seat of my awareness in relation to that momentary experience. To stabilize that takes time and takes practice. So it's not like, there's fireworks and ecstasis and, God knocks you on the head with this magical thunderbolt and all of a sudden you're awake. There's a gradual unfolding over time. And I think it's really prudent, even if someone arrives at a place where they think, oh, this is pretty stable. I can't really identify any moments where I'm not in the continuity of awareness. I think it's wise to reflect on that regularly, to have a contemplative practice around recognizing that perhaps there's some simulation here of presence or awakeness, because we do have, the human mind is utterly incredible. So intelligent. We can hear descriptions of these states and of these ways of being and kind of construct, because we want to be in that state, construct a simulation of the state itself and be operating as if we're living out of that form of consciousness. But actually there's this kind of thin layer, thin veneer between genuine presence itself and the presentation of that presence to ourselves. You know, it doesn't even have to be like trying to present to other people as if we are in this continuous awake state. Um, Similar to, what's the term? Oh no, it's completely gone from my brain. So we'll just bypass that one. Maybe I'll come back to it in a different video. Yeah, you know, be discerning about your own process. Recognize if you're getting caught up in sensationalism, in the content of an experience, because energy, empathetic resonance, seeming otherworldly experiences, which may very well be real. I'm not discarding that possibility at all. Um, you know, all of these kind of things that are presented as signs of awakening are still just the content of experience. And the whole reason to awaken in and of itself is that we have a recognition of who we really are as all that is. If we're simulating that, often we fall into these spiritual bypasses of just kind of homogenizing uh, the diversity of our experience as human beings on this earth in this embodied way. And through that, we might not be as compassionate as we could be to other beings who are also in embodied forms that are very different to ours, or are having a different type of experience, a different perspective. So, this constant returning to discernment, returning to an examination of our own state of consciousness and questioning, is this really it? Even assuming that no, this isn't it, can be beneficial. Because what I've found in my own practice is that if I make the assumption that there is some kind of simulation or layer of ego in between myself and awareness that is creating illusion, rather than the ego being subsumed and held within awareness as a tool, then, you know, I'm not losing anything by making that assumption, because all it's going to do is it's going to refine my return to awareness, and it's going to refine my discernment, and it's going to help me to practice being as deeply embedded in awareness as I possibly can. If I go the opposite direction and I make the assumption that no, this is it, I'm absolutely 100% looking out from the ground of my being and not from any sort of identification with the objects of experience, then there is a risk that perhaps I am suffering a veneer of awakening, and the ramifications of that can cause significant disruption in our own lives and in the lives of the people around us and the other beings around us. So yeah, that's my first thoughts on awakening. Perhaps a little different to some of the videos that you might have watched, but I hope it's been helpful to you. If you would like more content like this, please hit subscribe. Know too that I offer guidance and support for people around awakening. I also teach yoga, and varying other strings to my bow. So Thank you very much for your time, and I'll see you next time.